sentence. I wonder what it is about this topic that has drawn so many of you and encourages so many of you to join us tonight. I must give my thanks to Wendelin and to Joanna Ainsworth, who went on this journey together with us to pursue developmental theory in connection with Montessori's writing. The reason why we feel that this series of webinars is fundamental to our understanding of children today is because when Montessori first developed her theory, she wasn't aware of any developmental theory apart from that of Freud. So Freud was familiar to her, but the work of Piaget, Vygotsky, and certainly not Maslow or Bronfenbrenner were available to her. Yet she called the 20th century the century of the child. And the 20th century allowed us to get more insight into children's development and into children's learning. And if we study children in the wider sense, we most certainly need to be familiar with these theories in order to be able to interpret our observations in an objective way. We need to draw on much more than Montessori's pedagogy, which we so value as our springboard for working with children, but to truly understand her genius, to truly understand what she has given us, we need to be able to interpret her writing in context of the work of others. But it also brings to mind the fact that those giants that we come to study and we come to refer to also had limitations because they were theories which postulated certain...
I get it.
And that makes it quite tricky when you want to have a holistic perspective. We will also look at the work of some contemporary writers about children in later series, and we will finish the series with having a post-humanist approach to child development. More and more, it is felt that when we see the young child, particularly the child from birth to 6, we need to see the child not in a linear perspective, but in a perspective which gives us the child as an integrated whole. So rather than seeing child development as a triangle or a square divided into sections, or even a circle divided into sections, it is much better to see the child in circles which interlocked and overlap. And to some extent, Maslow will indicate that to us a little bit, but I will address that a little bit later. I think also what I would like you to understand, please, that I'm not going to explain Maslow and Bronfenbrenner theory. That's not the point of tonight's session. The point of tonight's session is to touch upon some elements of Maslow's and Bronfenbrenner's theory in order for us to get a better understanding of some of Montessori's writing and some of the things that we have come to understand about children through our daily observations. And hopefully, we will also find one or two little answers for some of the behaviors which don't quite fit in within our expectations of the children, because we have been impacted by so many things in the last 5 years, and those things also influence how children behave today. So the whole purpose of the sessions is to help us get a deeper understanding, to allow you to reflect. And I don't for 1 minute anticipate that we will all start from the same base of understanding. And I would hope that you will find enough references in the follow-up email and also in Joanna's blog, which will enable you to read more, to get better understanding if you feel that this is something that you should do. So for some of you, it will be introduction. For some of you, it will be a little tickle in your brain to think about Montessori and development in different ways. Some of you may not agree with what I say. It is absolutely fine. This is a personal perspective, which certainly I have explored with Joanna, who so beautifully researched it, but who also highlights the complexity of any developmental theory and the challenges we have when we apply them to understanding Montessori practice. We have chosen Maslow and Bronfenbrenner because in some ways, both of them respond most immediately to Montessori's view of the child. And certainly Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which he uses to explain his theory of motivation, particularly the lower parts of the triangle, very much highlight and resonate with Montessori's view of the child. I have prepared just few slides in the PowerPoint to help some of you to have a point of reference as I try to explain what I mean. So I'm going to try to share the screen. So here we go. Here is a Maslow's hierarchy described by the academics at the University of Reading. What we have here is this idea that the child's physiological needs and safety needs to be met in order for the child to begin to grow and develop. And we certainly use those needs to be fed, to have a warm home, to have fresh water as the absolute essentials for all children to be able to thrive. They also need to feel secure and safe. And Montessori reminds us constantly that children absolutely need to feel loved in order to be able to develop some kind of sense of self, sense of belonging, and sense of esteem. And I think that we can use these bases of Maslow's theory to understand where the children are coming from. And to some extent, we ask for some of that information when children register for the nursery or for the school. We want to know who is caring for them. You know, we come to understand how well they are looked after by having daily contact with them. But we need to be aware of those issues in order to perhaps highlight problems that the child may be experiencing and then finding routes how to help them. In this triangle that Maslow presents to us initially in his paper from 1934, he talks about the importance of self-actualization. He talks about the importance of developing the child's or the human full potential. And he defines this self-actualization in these words. He talks about the fact that people desire for self-fulfillment, that they have a tendency to become actualized in what they are potentially. And this tendency might be phrased as a desire to become more and more of what one idiosyncratically is, or become everything that one is capable of becoming. Now think about this definition from 1943 and think about Montessori's ideas about us creating an environment which will enable the child to develop his full potential. Doesn't it resonate with this idea that we are supporting the development of the potential of each individual child in our environments? But the question that I ask myself as we look back at the triangle of self-actualization, the way in which it is presented, it looks as if it was a kind of finite permanent achievement that we all strive towards. And for me, that doesn't quite ring true from two perspectives. Because do we ever feel that we have fulfilled our full potential? Don't we ever want to achieve a little bit more? Aren't we motivated to work further? And the other, so it is a temporary state. And I will come back to this idea of potentially not being a permanent, but more temporary state. And the other thing that comes to mind when I look at the issue of self-actualization, I begin to wonder, so if we promote this sense of achievement, if we promote the potential of the individual, do we somehow overlook the importance of the community or the importance of the collective? What does it really mean to be meeting one's full potential? Is it really just about the self, or is it about much more? It makes me also think that in order to fulfill one's potential, one needs not only help from others, but one needs to share some of one's, or there need to be some benefit to this potential that I have developed. So there's far more impact on community. And I will come back to that. I want to go back to the idea of the self-actualization being a temporary state. In our discussions about normalization, which we have had before the summer, Heidi von Staden suggested that perhaps we should explore the state of normalization more as a state of self-actualization, more as a state and the moment when the child achieve kind of oneness with themselves, the child achieve sense of achievement or feels sense of achievement, which potentially nurtures their spirit and enables them to be more capable of other things, enables them, and it could be in relation to self-achievement, but it could also be in relation to sharing one's achievement with others. And this would be particularly relevant as we are thinking of the 6, 7, 8-year-old children who are really enjoying working with others and creating together. In a paper from 2004, we also find that others have added more layers to this triangle of triangle of motivation, and placed altruism and sharing ideas with others and sharing universal values with others, giving rather than receiving, as the next layer of this pyramid. And I think that in his revisions of his theory, Maslow also came to the conclusion that for quite a long time we have misinterpreted it in terms of personal achievement, that the person who meets this self-fulfillment is also a person who meets this self-fulfillment because they give to others. They share with others what they have achieved. And that brings us to the next model of Bronfenbrenner, where we now come to see the child in a from a very, very different perspective. And I'll just skip to the Bronfenbrenner model. which we have here. Now, Bronfenbrenner's system is a system of concentric circles where the child sits in the middle. So the child is no longer seen as an individual, but the child is seen as a multitude of experiences which form this individual. And the microsystem from the Montessori perspective is really, really important, because the child is not an island. The child is not separate from others. The child is part of the uniqueness of the child is contributed by the family, by all sorts of other influences. Joanne, in her blog, explains this so very beautifully, and she celebrates this representation of Bronfenbrenner's ecological system, looking at the system not from the point of view of a child who has grown up within the white community. She has chosen a system which looks at it from the point of view of the Black child or Black adolescent youth who is growing up, and what it is that influences that Black adolescent youth in present times. It is really interesting to see that some of this theory was postulated as early as 2011, when in fact some of the issues which you can see in the Corona system, the kind of impact of environmental issues which are far beyond the immediate reach of the individual child, has only occurred during the last 3 years. I will go back to have a look at the definition of this system, because it is really a theory which looks at the relationship between living things and the environment. And when we look at this system, we begin to see that the child is a product of, to some extent, of the microsystem, but that there have been far greater influences through the other circles of the exosystem and the microsystem. And so we begin to see how economy and political situations influence the development of the child, again highlighting the fact that no child is an island, and that children are, you are all familiar with the saying that in Africa the child is brought up by the village, the parenting is shared, and some of the indigenous theories of children's development, or some of the indigenous approaches to helping children to bring up children, or indigenous series of parenting, are very much a shared system, a shared responsibility for bringing that child up. Now, Montessori herself recognized very early that whilst the family and the school and the community of the child are very, very important, the social responsibility for the child's upbringing and for the child's education is very, very important. And this is why she felt it was so important that we should encourage education to think beyond the parameters of the government and politics of one country, that education should have aspiration of achieving a better life for everybody. And this is something that we continue to grapple to this day. But I would also suggest that perhaps we need to look even further than just white or Black communities, that we need to look at broader issues which affect all of us as we support children as we support young people in their education and in their parenting. And Joanna so very kindly, following discussions, found another model which would allow us to interpret both Maslow and Bronfenbrenner from a slightly different perspectives. Here we have ideas which are presented to us in linear way and interconnected way, all of them being relevant to our understanding of children, placing the ecology, which Bronfenbrenner called his theory in later lives, he called it the system of bioecology. So it's the biological element together with the ecological element which creates the child or influences the child's development. And here we have got introduction of issues like inclusion, diversity, sustainability. I hope that those resonate with you as you are thinking about Montessori's Education for Peace. I hope that you are also recognizing some of the other aspects of other aspects of fashionable phrases which we are addressing today, thinking about self-regulation, agency, and interdependence. Those are the buzzwords of today. And somehow we need to bear those in mind if we are thinking or creating an environment in which the whole child develops, in which the whole child is supported, in which the whole child and his family are given an opportunity to grow in a supportive community which values their individual contribution to the whole. What I liked about this diagram is also the idea that we need to recognize that all theoretical frameworks have got limitations, and that we need to explore them and tease out what is relevant for us today. I'm not sure if I have done justice to Joanne's blog. I'm most definitely not as eloquent in expressing these ideas as she was in her blog, but I hope that I have given you a sense of, or an opportunity to look at Montessori in context of these three series and perhaps take it a little bit beyond and look at issues of concern today, because certainly sustainability and climate challenges will continue, will have impact on the children of today. And I feel that it is our responsibility to prepare them for some of these challenges. We are going to break into breakout rooms, and we will have an opportunity to discuss these three series or two series interpreted in different ways in our breakout rooms. And I would like you to consider the following questions as we go into the breakout rooms. So what can we see as the connection between Maslow, or can you see any connection between Maslow and normalization? How do we foster sense of community whilst acknowledging the uniqueness of the child? Do we really always acknowledge the importance of the many influences which create the microsystem? So do we really understand where the child is coming from? Do we really understand the children's experiences? And finally, but not least, should we include sustainability and climate challenges in the chrono system presented to us by Bronfenbrenner in order to ensure that children of today are prepared for the world of tomorrow. Hannah, would you like to share?
Hello, everyone. We had a really lovely international group. It was amazing, people from all over the world. So we really did feel like a big community, which was wonderful. We just looked at the idea that how looking at different theories can support our Montessori knowledge and just be a real springboard for exploration. And we all decided we want to extend the triangle, Maslow's triangle, with a different shape on the top, maybe some more triangles or a kind of fluid shape, just to extend this idea of self-actualization as being a journey. And we talked about practical ways to support children to feel part of a global community and have a more international perspective. And we had some lovely examples of Polish dancing and food from different places. So it was a really great opportunity just to hear ideas from South Africa and Sarajevo and here in the UK. And thank you for letting us do that. It was a great opportunity to talk about Maslow and Bronfenbrenner.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I'm so glad it's resonated with your group of participants. Heidi, may I ask for your contribution?
Yes, thanks, Barbara. We also had a lovely chat, and it's difficult to know what to actually feed back, but I think that one of the points that we raised was how perhaps the child moving towards actualization and perhaps the link to normalization ultimately all weaves towards the child understanding their cosmic task, and that would then lead back to this idea of the social justice and looking after our earth and the planet and so on. And one of the people in the group spoke really about how you begin to notice the shift in the child who's been in the favorable environment, to seeing that sort of quiet confidence, being more than just the child who can concentrate, and how it's impacted by the microcosm of the classroom And yet coming from the times that we've just come through with COVID, where there was exclusion in terms of everybody staying at home, now coming together, we've had so much adjustment and adaptation has had to happen, that we need to look at this normalization, actualization as more than, yeah, it's so multi-layered, in fact.
It is without any doubt complex. Yeah. Thank you so much. Mariam?
Hang on. Yes, I'm unmuted. We also had a really lovely discussion, although a few of the South African ladies were sitting in the dark because they have this load sharing at the moment, so they were all in the dark, so we knew exactly where they were coming from. We talked about things like secure background and how important it is within the nursery to form that secure attachment, and how that sense of the community within Bronfenbrenner's model shows through much of what Heidi and Hannah have spoken about. Sonia mentioned you'd mentioned the cyclical nature of Maslow's needs, and how our current challenges were really concerning in terms of, you know, all over the world, but particularly in the UK with food poverty, how we're going to help those children go forward. And we talked about the challenges on Montessori and our place within that role of being interlinked, child development being interlinked, interconnectivity across, you know, all of our countries and communities. But the word that kept being used was community. And we also talked about normalization and whether we should be thinking about that, maybe using a different heading makes it easier for us to understand. But yeah, sustainability and climate change, yeah, was top on the agenda as well.
Thank you so much. That's brilliant. Suzanne?
Oh gosh, we just needed at least another hour. So we had a really, really interesting discussion, and most of our discussion actually ended up hinging around the sort of moral element that we have as the teachers in the environment, you know, because thinking about the type of people that we are wanting potentially to shape, and the people that the parents, when I talk about people, I'm talking about the children, you know, the children that the parents would like to be shaped. We also had quite a diverse group in terms of where we are, you know, and figuring out that self-actualization for the child or for the parent means so many different things to the different families and parents that are in our space. And when we have such a diverse group of children, their parents' expectations are different. You know, some parents want their children to be active contributors to society, and other parents do not want that, do not necessarily have that vision for their child. We also looked at, you know, how do we engage the uniqueness of the child? One of our participants is of a culture, but working in a completely different culture, you know, so something that in her own culture would be like, you know, the child needs to get dirty and it's quite fine. In the culture where she's working now, the child needs to be changed as soon as the child is sweaty, for example. So, but the child doesn't want to be changed because they're having fun. So what do you follow, and how do you then provide that sort of actualization for the child? We also looked a little bit at how we would prepare the child for tomorrow's world. And Helen actually gave a very nice viewpoint there, where she said, you know, it's also about perspective, and that when something happens even within the classroom, to start getting the children to look at that, you know, well, this was your perspective, now let's look at how that would look like if we were looking at it from the other person's perspective, to start building that broader vision of knowledge. And then just to end, I can't remember if it was Hannah who said, we, you know, looking at different shapes that potentially the triangle could change. Liska was just sharing that when she was listening to you, Barbara, she sort of got this vision that the triangle had changed into different interlocking pyramids, which I thought was quite nice.
And that's really, really lovely. And Wendy, would you like to add?
Right. Thank you, Barbara. No, we had a lovely group. We had quite a few South African students, which was lovely, but they're fairly near the beginning of their training, I think. So they were pleased to contribute and also listen to the contributions. I mean, we only looked at 2 questions, I'm afraid, because we had lots of discussion, which was really nice. Everybody felt that love and support should be at the bottom of Maslow's triangle. And we felt that the triangle could be used as a basis. And several people thought we could interlink rather than have a triangle, like a chain interlinking system. And it was interesting, the second question, working within the community. I feel now that in the UK particularly, we are working much better within the community. And Sarah was in our group, so she's doing the OMEP sustainability course. And she was saying, from her point of view, her community now is really well knit, if you understand what I'm saying. And so she's got a lot of parents joining into her community, so her community is getting bigger, and she's also got people outside the school. And everybody felt that the cultural differences play an important role in the development of the child. So we felt that was really positive. So I'm afraid we didn't get further than that. Sorry.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you so much, Wendy. I wonder if Joanna would like to make any comment to what she has learned. If you don't wish, that's absolutely fine. Sorry for calling you out like this, but since it is your work around which we explored to some extent, I just wonder if you would like to say something.
I'm overwhelmed by the community that we've got, this wonderful international community that we have. There have been some lovely perspectives in the breakout rooms. I'm really, really interested. What was it that I liked? Something that Heidi said. Anyway, I'm going to look back at the recording, and really, really interesting. I think people, rather than pick any individual thing out, I think there've been some really interesting conversations. I like the links to normalization. I like the questions about whether we should be using this term. I think that was alluded to, which is a bit of a bugbear of mine. I think it's been really, really interesting.
Well, thank you so much for allowing us to, or guiding our conversation tonight. Like all of you, we had a phenomenal group. Some interesting comments that have come is Sarah said that the community that Montessori writes about was much more homogeneous than the community that we are talking about today, and that links to Wendy's comment about cultural. We need to consider so much more the culture of children to respect it, and I loved Hannah's comment, which said she would prefer to sing about the child raising a village. I think that was a really wonderful flipping of the idea. And certainly there's so much for us to learn from the children that we should think about that. Christine mentioned the importance of inclusion and how important the community of the class is for the child who potentially may feel isolated through their disability or through their difficulties, and how important the sense of well-being and belonging is for that child in order to be able to learn. And we had most amazing contribution from Kate, who said why don't we flip the triangle the other way around and we have self-actualization at the bottom? In one of the papers we will be sharing with you about Maslow and where he got his idea for this theory of motivation, links him to a Blackfoot community, indigenous population in Canada, and the people within that community themselves flipped the triangle over and had self-actualization at the bottom. When I first saw it, I felt extremely uncomfortable because I was bound by the definition of what the self-actualization mean by Maslow. But Kate put it most beautifully. She said that the child is born absolutely perfect, and we all welcome this perfect child. And it is through the love and perfection we give the child develops self-esteem, and then we need to really think about the safety and the physical environment that we provide for them. So once again, I salute all of you for taking the courage to join us, to have your brains tickled and think about things out of the box. And once again, we have learned so much from all of you. Thank you for your contributions. And we hope you will continue to explore these ideas with us when we meet again in a couple of months' time, when we will look at the work of Vygotsky and Piaget. Thank you, everybody, very much indeed. Have a good evening.